case found that the state must prove that by posting of his own public Facebook page after receiving a restraining order, that he engaged in a single act of conduct that constitutes an act of communication under RC 644-4 and contact under 173B that violated the restraining order. They define communication. When they determine a communication, they're looking at what and how it was written or suggested in the posts that were directed at the victim in a public forum. So in this case, it's a public forum. The jail page is public. You can just look it up. You don't have to have anything special. And the state would submit that although Mr. Connolly is legally prohibited from being on social media, he can't have his own social media accounts. He can't be going around in there at all. He can have access to that in the fact that all of these people that are familiar with Mr. Parisi, that are familiar with the jail paper, can show that to him. And it's pretty obvious that that's exactly what happened. He had the videos. He had them at a protective order hearing. He reached out to Mr. Parisi in Messenger, identifying that he had seen these things. He had copies of those messages to show to the police department when he reported a violation. And so Mr. Parisi should have known all of that prior to posting that message on October 30th. He had the message from Mr. Connolly. There was a standing and raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
You can have a seat. Can you please state and spell your last name for the record?
Last name is Connolly, C-O-N-N-O-L-L-Y.
And Mr. Connolly, do you live in this area?
I do.
And are you currently employed or working?
No.
How long have you been living in this general area?
Since I was released from jail, I believe it was July 20th last year.
And obviously you were subpoenaed to be here today as a witness in this trial involving a Thomas Parisi. Do you know Mr. Parisi?
Not personally.
Okay. Do you know of him?
Yes, I do.
Do you know of him?
He is involved with the people that I'm like the homeless and stuff like that. Where I hang around. He's into drugs and stuff like that, so he's always around. People are always talking about him. And always telling me things like he's looking for me and stuff like that.
Now you said that he knows people that you are associated with. I heard that you replied to are you currently homeless?
Yes, I do.
And when you refer to these people, who are these people that you are referring to?
Just individuals that I met at the Honeyman shelter.
Okay.
In the community, unfortunately, we're like the caste sides of society, so we kind of congregate together at sometimes, and he's always bugging someone.
I do have to ask, when you refer to we, who are you? Who is we? Who are these people that are congregated together? You said something about being an outcast. I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing too. So, who is we that are hanging?
You want me to name everyone?
No, but who are these people? You're saying you seem to be clumping yourself in with a group of people. Who are these?
Objection, Your Honor. The relevance to this line of questioning just eludes me as to what these fictitious people that we're mentioning here, these I don't understand her line of questioning where this is going to.
I'm trying to lay a foundation to get
You
to
may
the next
proceed.
spot.
Thank you. You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you're hanging out, you're associated with the homeless population.
Yes.
And you've indicated that Mr. Parisi is somehow related to these people in a way, has some sort of connection with these people?
Yes, he does.
And how is that, what is that connection? Have you had direct contact with him?
No, I haven't had it.
What kind of contact have you had with Mr. Parisi?
He just looks for me, I guess. He wants to videotape me. He wants to, he keeps saying that I've been absconding, and I guess he's trying to get me, picked up, I've never absconded a single minute. The two people that I have to report to know my every move before I make it. And when Mr. Parisi first started documenting me, he created such a public spectacle that the homeless shelter said, listen, there's nothing against you personally, but they were gaining a lot of unwanted attention, so we're going to have to, not have contact anymore. So that I lost a big resource there. I lost where I was living. Thank God I had a vehicle that I could stay in. And after that, he couldn't find me because he got me kicked out of the only place I had to go. So he would be there all the time. Anytime I would go back to get food or something at the drop-in center, people would be like, he was just here, he's looking for you, he's posting all this stuff about you. And he's stalking. I don't know what else to say. I think he probably has some mental issues that he should work through. I understand why he's doing it, but how he's doing it is wrong.
Okay.
The things he's saying is slanderous because
So you said that, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you said that people were telling you that he was posting things. Are you aware of what those things were?
yeah, sometimes I would see things, snippets here and there that are always very bad. Usually my picture and slanderous things that he would say. Some true things, he would get some things correct, but he would just go off on a tangent and say a lot of untrue stuff. When he first did this, I was using Messenger, which I was not aware that it was
We're going to get there. I just want to slow you down for just a second. So you were made aware that he was posting some things. Where was he posting them?
on Facebook
Okay.
and YouTube, and I think he posts stuff on TikTok and Twitter and pretty much everywhere. So,
All right. And so you have viewed some of these on various social media. You've actually seen these postings?
the only ones I've seen is like on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay. And did you reach out to Mr. Parisi at all about these posts?
The original post that he did, he started reporting on 100 Nights shelter, and he was making a lot of claims. Mostly about sex offenders that were staying there, and I knew it was just a matter of time before my name came out. Obviously, it's something that everyone's embarrassed about. So when my picture was finally posted as his main profile picture, that's when I contacted him through Messenger. Now, I was using Messenger just And it allows you to message Facebook users. So I messaged the jail paper king, and I said, listen, I understand what you're doing. I understand that, the community has a right to hear if there's any risks in the community, but what you're saying about me is wrong. I tried to explain to him what exactly that I was convicted of and the difference between the two that he was saying. I was not trying to start a confrontation. I was respectful and professional. And I asked him if he was going to say something, please. And then he posted all of it on Facebook and said a lot of bad things and said, this person is illegally using Facebook and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And he didn't want to have any type of conversation or anything. He was just using this as he is right now, making a spectacle of me. So I talked to my PO afterwards that day because he was like, oh, I'm going to contact his probation officer. Contacted my probation officer at the time, which was Ryan Conway. And I said, I currently use Messenger. And I said, no, is that part of Facebook? Can I use that? He said, it is part of Facebook, so you can't. I deleted it right there in his office. And I've only used the base text message services now. And
Do you recall when you sent that message to to the jail paper? You said you sent
a
it.
long time ago. It was probably late summer of last year.
Okay. Your Honor, if I may approach.
You may. Thank
I
you.
have copies of those messages that Mr. Connolly is referring to. This is your copy,
Thank you,
Mr.
Tom. I
Parisi.
appreciate it.
Mr. Connolly, do you recognize these?
Yes.
Okay. And what are those?
That's the initial message that I sent him, asking him to recheck his information, basically saying that what he was saying, or portraying to the public, was slander, because I didn't do the things he said. I told him what I did, and I told him exactly the statutes and everything that I was convicted of.
And these are really hard to read. I have a hard time printing these out, but can you see on there where it indicates the date or these messages were coming back from there?
I believe 9/24/1.
Okay. And does it indicate who responded to those messages on there?
Sent by Thomas Parisi, so it was myself and Thomas Parisi.
Okay, all right. Your Honor, I'd like to give this in stage one.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. So noted. States one. Thank you.
So after you sent those messages to the jail paper, which was responded to by Mr. Parisi, did you have occasion to be made aware of any other postings that were continuing after you had sent that message?
Yes, I was nonstop.
Okay. So what, if anything, did you do at that point?
I asked my probation officer what type of legal things I could do. Unfortunately, he said, there wasn't much. He said that I could try to get a restraining order. Of course, a lot of the people that were going through the same kind of thing that I was living around. But for some reason, he was just focusing on me, and probably because I tried to defend myself. So I found out that I could get a restraining order. I called the police. I said, this man is looking for me. He's actively looking for me. Everyone I know is telling me where he was the last night, he comes out at like 3 in the morning with a mask on, and he started to find me. He said that he's going to videotape me sleeping in the van. He said he hopes that I'm living in fear. He's going to find me. I wear a mask from that point on in public everywhere because I know the people that he attracts to this page and the people that he deals with on a daily basis aren't very upstanding citizens, I guess. They're more apt to act on ignorance rather than fact. So it was dangerous what he was doing to me. I got cameras all over my van. I park only in front of like businesses with cameras in there because I know he's actively trying to find me. I've had people, while he was posting stuff about me, ask if I was the guy on Facebook or if I was John Connolly. And, like, these people are trying to find me.
So did you end up applying for a protective order?
Yes, I did.
And did you get one?
Yes, I got a temporary restraining order.
Do you recall the date of when you got the temporary restraining
I
order?
did not.
I know I asked the court to take judicial notice that,
Of our own files, yes, you did.
so it was issued on October 22nd of 2021.
Thank you.
So you said you got a temporary protective order. What type of contact did it prohibit?
All type of contact, either like first person contact or third party. The main thing I was trying to stop is the slanderous stuff he was posting on Facebook, and just the type of portrayal he was doing of me to the public. So I had, he portrayed me as a monster. I understand what my charges are. I made a mistake. I'm trying to move forward as best as I can.
And did you have a final hearing on that protective order? Okay, do you recall when that was?
He moved for a speedy trial, so I believe it was maybe 2 weeks after.
Okay, so the end of October?
I believe so.
All right. And did you appear at that hearing? Did Mr. Parisi appear at that hearing? And can you just very briefly describe what happened at that hearing?
The judge asked for evidence, and I said that it was on the Facebook page, that, I'm not allowed to go to. I can't use Facebook. So I asked him to review all the videos. I had videos on my phone sent to me, and I had a lot of them. And they were like 3-minute rants, 6-minute rants, and I wanted to show the judge it in its entirety so he could understand the context of what he was saying. And the judge did not want to review the entire thing. He wanted me, to condense it.
But did you make it clear during that hearing that you, although you you're prohibited from having access to social media, that you still had access?
Yes,
You could get.
I showed him my phone, and he looked through it, and he played a clip, and it just seemed like he was in a hurry, and he asked what part exactly was the part pertaining to me. I wasn't exactly sure because there's so much content. So he didn't look, he didn't really review it.
And did he make a decision about the continuance of that protective order at that hearing?
No, he took it into consideration.
Okay. After that hearing, were you made aware of any additional posts that were put onto Facebook?
Yes.
And when were you made aware of that?
It was, I mean, sporadically. I go to usually 100 Nights parking lot, like every day, and they were always telling me stuff, about posts. I know that when he violated the restraining order, he was there very late at night. I guess someone.
So I'm just going to stop you for a second and go back a little bit. So there was a particular post that came after that, that hearing. Do you recall what that was?
Oh, I'm not sure exactly the time frame, but I know that he was outside 109th shelter, and he said that I am not where I'm supposed to be. He said you're supposed to be here. He didn't use the term absconding, I believe, but he said, you're supposed to be here, you're registered here. I'm looking for you. Basically, he was checking up on where I was supposed to be.
And you were made aware of that post?
Yeah.
Did you view it somehow?
Yeah.
And what did you do when you saw that post?
I took it to the police because I thought it was a violation of the executive order. He was at a place that he knew I was at. He was looking for me, and he said by name on Facebook that he was looking for me. And so I took it to the police station and just said, hey, listen, this guy's so close to
Let me stop you again for just a second. I'm sorry, Mr. Connolly. May I approach? I just want to have him view this video again to confirm that's what he is.
You may. Attorney Mr. Parisi, you've seen a silly question, but.
Yes, sir. If I may view this one.
Come on up to where you can see as well.
Certainly.
It's the jail paper. We survived. Higher quality, we're going to stop doing live videos. Because apparently today, someone watching the live video called the police and said that I was stalking John Connolly. But one nice gentleman from the state troopers and one nice gentleman in car number 29 from King PD came to speak with me. And as you can see, no silver bracelets. And I'm not stalking, but listen, John Connolly, why don't you report to where you're supposed to report to? You're not supposed to be in a van down by the river. You're supposed to be in bed at 100 Nights. Because that's where you're registered to, mister. I'll be watching. Thomas Parisi for the jail paper.
Do you recognize that video, Mr. Connolly? Is that the video that you brought to the police department?
Yes, it is.
Ultimately, what happened to the protective order? What decision did the court make?
It was dropped. No finding.
Okay. Do you recall?
Ah, yes.
Gentlemen, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm looking forward to this.
No trouble.
So, how are you this afternoon, Mr. Conley? All right. So, Mr. Conley, are you a convicted felon?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And is it true that you were convicted of, what would be RSA 631, 2, I believe, felonious sexual assault, as well as a second-degree assault, and a felonious sexual assault, sexual contact with a victim under 13 on July 23rd last year?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so is it true that part of your sentence of this conviction that you are required to register both your name, your likeness, your address with the New Hampshire Sex Offender Against Children Registry?
Of course.
Okay, excellent. Bear with me just 1 second. Bear with me 1 second. I have so much papers, I made a real bad mess over here. If I can see if the witness recognizes this.
Yeah, we just show it to Attorney Rourke so she knows what we're doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Conley, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
My registration.
And How is this accessible?
Online.
Online, okay. And in your petition, you state, oh, let me briefly go back, sorry. So you are required to update your address at any time that you move from one place to another, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're also required to report that to probation as well, but just besides the registrar, probation is the one that handles it? Or who handles your updating of address?
I have to check in with my probation officer with anything I do, anywhere I see, every day. And also Donald Lundeen, Detective Donald Lundeen, from the police department, who I believe handles the registration information.
Okay, excellent. All right, now, let's see. So how long do you have in a certain circumstance? How long do you have from when you are going to go from one domicile to another to report to those said probation officers that you're moving? How long are you required by, or allowed by law?
I'm going to object. I'm not sure how this is
The-
related to a violation of a protective order, whether or not, how he's reporting, or whether he's reporting, or what he's reporting, or when.
Your Honor?
Mr. Parisi, tell me the relevant.
Certainly. I'm an investigative journalism. All of this is within my First Amendment rights of doing an investigative report about an absconding sex offender who fails to report to where he's going. The crux of the matter is I was in the midst of my freedom of speech at a protest against 100 Nights and this individual, and now it's been twisted into something else. So the relevance is, I'm trying to establish that he's aware, as he put in his petition, that I'm a news reporter, which is what he mentions in it. That's where I'm leading up to.
The complaint is that he posted a video of himself outside of 100 Nights making contact with Mr. Connolly.
Sure, and I can shorten this up even more. I
Oh,
think
yes.
the gentleman's already acknowledged.
Certainly. Then we'll move past
I
that.
think we can move on. I think the issues already have been addressed.
Yeah, well, I'll go a different way around the barn, Your Honor. I appreciate it. So then, when did you become aware of the Facebook page known as the Jail Paper? The exact date, more or less, if you could.
The exact date, I don't know.
Okay. I believe it was Attorney O'Rourke had messaged it, but I believe, if I can hand this back, could you read the dates on your said text messages so that we can acknowledge at least more or less? Can you see what the date is? If you can.
Yes, my said text message is 9/24/21 at 12:50 a.m.
Okay, excellent. Now, approximately when did you lose the housing at 100 Nights that you had mentioned before? When was the housing debacle had come across?
I don't know.
Do you remember the
I
exact-
don't have a diary, no.
Okay. Would you say that you had been at 100 Nights on or around when you had filed the actual petition? Or when in this alleged loss of housing, when was it that you actually lost housing at 100 Nights? I'm trying to establish this, Your Honor, because I have documents for this. When did you lose it? What
I
day?
don't remember the date that they threw me out and asked to stop having contact with me. I'm not sure.
Okay. I have here, Your Honor, a printout that I believe I do have 2 copies. It's the registry that I entered into evidence with Judge Donovan, so it is already entered into evidence, but it's the roster of individuals that are staying at 100 Nights. One of the individuals is actually in the gallery, but the names of every individual that stays at this homeless shelter is on there. Mr. Conley Jr., before he was actually kicked out, his name is not on there. So I'm trying to establish that the reason for my investigative journalism that led to this alleged violation of the court order was because I was practicing my First Amendment constitutionally protected rights of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and as an investigative journalism. So that's kind of where I'm going with it. But
How is disclosing the names of the people staying at 100 Nights?
well, no, what it is his name doesn't appear on the list
How is it helpful?
because he's lying about having been there. He
You
wasn't.
can get there with that.
Yeah, he wasn't actually there. But
Well, you can cross-examine him on that.
Oh.
And if his name's not on the list, it's not on the list.
do you remember where you were on October 14th of 2021?
No.
Okay. So this is Your Honor. I have one more copy for both the court and Mr. O'Rourke. But this is a list that I'm presenting. If you could tell me what the list is, Mr. Conley, if you
Well,
recognize.
you don't have to.
Well, I've already said that.
You- Yeah, you can
I'm-
ask him a question.
I'm a little bit.
Don't show that to the witness yet, it's not being proffered.
Okay, so we'll take this.
Do you want to ask him if he was there that night? And
Were you there?
why-
Yes,
ask
thank
him
you.
Why his name wasn't on the list, if you have a list where there's no name on it.
Do you know why you weren't there on October 14th? If at that time you were registered to there?
Like I said, my probation officer and Don Lundy know where I am before I'm there, every night.
Your Honor, I've got it now, so I'll make it more concrete and wrap it up. So basically, on this thing that you had already seen, your address is 17 Lamson Street. When did you change your address from 17 Lamson Street to homeless, which it currently is on? When did you change that?
I could get in touch with Don Lundy.
Do you remember more or less when it was?
No, I don't.
Okay. Your Honor, I don't have a time stamp on it, but it was far after the actual incident. It was far after
Well, you're
November.
testifying now, so.
Sorry.
You can wait until it's your turn to testify.
Yeah, sorry. So I'll wait till that. Okay. I'm going to wrap it up right now. Let's see.
No, no
Okay.
hurry at all, take your time.
Oh, okay. So now I would like to see on this petition here, if you can read on the final order of the petition, if you could just read what Judge Donovan said in regards to this alleged stalking, that would be the final order. If you can just read this, do you recognize
You may,
this document?
thank you.
Okay, it says that like this, has not been stopped, as defined in RSA 623-3A, case dismissed. Says that plaintiff has had no contact with the defendant since late September 2021. Plaintiff alleges only that defendant's conduct has resulted in losing housing. I have no idea.
It's a reputation, I think, that there's a weird
Sure, I'll
word.
go.
But if you can read whatever, the last little part right after that, there's like 5 more words at the end of that sentence.
Some about personal safety.
I believe it reads what Judge Donovan's writing is a
You
little
get a
bit.
chance to testify.
Yeah, but
Right now is your chance to ask him.
sorry about it, Your Honor.
Hey, you're doing great.
It's not as easy as it is on TV, so they have a script to work with. All right. You know what? I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Mr.
Where you
Conley.
work, anything to polish up? This gentleman step down?
Yes.
You may, thank you, sir. You may
Thank you.
step down. State- Mr. Parisi.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Your Honor, I don't have, I can testify. So if I could do that, Your Honor, it doesn't make sense to me as a pro se litigant. I'm still kind of not great on criminal procedures because I'm just a college student. If I testify, I would just testify and then Mr. O'Rourke would cross-examine me. Would that be correct?
That's usually how it works.
And then after that, do we do?
And you're under no obligation to testify. The state's obligation to prove your guilt. It's not your obligation to prove your guilt.
I'm still going to protect my obviously my constitutional rights, but I would like to testify on my own behalf. All right, let me just bring up my little thing. All right.
Do you affirm the information you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalty of perjury?
Yes, sir.
Please be seated. And even though we all know who you are, please state your name for the record.
Thomas Parisi.
Mr. Parisi, what does he like me to know?
Well, what it is now I had made a video, which we have all seen about 2 times. The video is of old content, which happened to go up on the jail paper on, I believe, the morning of October 31st. Now, what I have it now to express to the court is during the latter part of September, most particularly when John Conley Jr. had messaged me on September 26th, I had began a television series, an episodic, how should one say it? A series of episodes of sex offenders here in the local Cheshire County area that posed a danger to young children soliciting candy door to door in the Cheshire County Keene area. So what I had done is, besides Mr. Conley, I had done a series of videos on numerous other people. During this little
I'll bet you have a couple comments. All right, we may proceed with closing arguments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this case is about, it really comes down to State v. Craig and whether or not that video that we entered into evidence is considered a contact and a communication directed at Mr. Connolly while an active protective order is in place. As you can see, and also whether or not Mr. Parisi had the intention of meeting that message to get to Mr. Connolly. Just to recap, the temporary order was issued on October 22nd of 2021 and served upon Mr. Parisi on October 24th of 2021. There was a final hearing on October 29th of 2021, in which case Justice Donovan had taken the matter under advisement and then ultimately issued an order vacating that on November 5th of 2021. The Facebook post in question was posted onto the jail paper on October 30th, 2021, a day after the final hearing and prior to the order actually being vacated. So the question is really, is that post, was it meant for Mr. Connolly, and should Mr. Parisi have understood that he would likely get that message? In State v. Craig, Mr. Parisi is correct. The issue there is this was two individuals, both private individuals, and neither one of them were related to or arguing about being part of being a journalist. He was posting these messages on a public Facebook page. The idea and holding in the court was that in order for a post on a public Facebook page, that had to be after receiving a restraining order. So the victim in that matter had gotten a stalking or protective order, but that was a domestic violence protective order. Prohibiting protective order hearing that has First Amendment rights, and he can expose all of these things that he wants to. All the information he's gotten has been primarily from public places. Where that became a violation in that video is when he directly looked at the camera and said, "John Connolly, listen, you should be at 100 Nights Shelter, not in a van down by the river." Had he not directed that message at Mr. Connolly while knowing that he is likely to have access and see that message, knowing that there's a protective order in place, that's when it became a violation of a protective order in the opinion of the state, and therefore he should be held accountable for that.
Thank you. Mr. Parisi, would it be helpful, some people like it, some people don't. When I was trying cases, I always enjoyed knowing what the judge was thinking, so I don't want to distract you.
Any wisdom from the court is welcome.
I assure you there's no wisdom, but I can let you know what I'm thinking.
Okay.
And that's sometimes, I found it to be, when I've been in your position, very advantageous, because it's often difficult to read a judge's mind. So if you could, among other things you want to address for me right now.
Yes.
The state ended with the primary concern I have.
Yes.
And let me preface my comments with don't let me dissuade you from whatever it is you hope to do now. But it is hard for me, sitting as a judge, to watch the video twice and hear you say what Attorney Rourke just indicated you said, and then end with, "I've been watching you." And that happened, if I understand the chronology from my court record,
Yes.
that happened the day after the final hearing.
That video was published on the 31st, and the hearing in front of Judge Donovan was the 29th.
Yeah.
But the original content, and I could show you off my phone, the original content was October 19th.
So you published it after
in a barrage.
the final hearing.
Yes.
Well, the barrage doesn't.
Yeah, but no, I had published it after the final.
No, and again, that's why I'm just letting you know areas where my eyebrows are raised. Like,
Naturally. Like I've said,
I'll bet you're pretty good at this, and I'll bet that wasn't a slip of the pen. As my
no,
concern.
yeah, well,
So if you want, and you don't have to address that. I'm saying the second time, and I mean it. You're a savvy gentleman, and you know it's not your obligation to prove your innocence. It's their obligation to prove it. But that's one hang up I have. 'Cause
Yeah.
You said you wanted to talk to me, you wanted to do it close, so I'm giving you some insight on what I'm looking at. And so it's difficult for me to conclude anything other than that was.
well, I have a good one for you. Now here's where we hit into where John Conley the liar makes it. So what I had posted there, he had said, and now I wish I had 100 Nights of Terror, but you could go.
You wish you had time to what?
I wish I had 100 Nights of Terror to show you.
Oh.
But you can imagine that you're, a judicial officer the same as yourself, Judge Donovan was here. So now he had told Judge Donovan that probation or London or whoever it was had erased and deleted his Facebook. He said that in court. He said he had deleted Messenger, he deleted his Facebook. Now, my phone's dead. I don't need to prove he still has Facebook because I know he does. But he had said at court that he had deleted his Facebook. So presumably on my end, since he had not, now he is a convicted sex offender using Facebook illegally, telling his probation officer that he's not using Facebook, doing it illegally. Prosecutorial people know.
Not be there.
Oh,
Was
yes.
that part of the record? Were you even in on that first one? Were you even in when Justice Donovan was here?
I don't
I
think
was
so.
not here
Yeah.
when that was read a protective order. I had reviewed some of the footage. I had reviewed the audio. He has stated, and I believe Mr. Connolly did state here on the record that he didn't understand that Messenger was actually Facebook.
He did say
And
that
that
today.
he notified his PO and that they deleted it from his phone. So it would just be Messenger,
Your
not
point's
Facebook.
well taken.
Yeah, yeah.
I just, and again, I wasn't doubting what you said. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, no, and I can understand, like, the court, obviously, I've already aced myself in regard to a certain extent, but I want to explain my actions. When I presume that, okay, he's now said in front of a judge and in front of, in court, where you're under penalty of perjury, he's not going to be on Facebook, then he shouldn't be on Facebook to begin with. Now he's sneaking back on Facebook after he took it off his phone, because when he says that this violation took place, according to, Jermaine's not here for us to go through his narrative, but if we look through Jermaine's narrative, he contacted Jermaine either like the morning of Halloween or the night before. That was a day and a half after he was standing in this courtroom with Judge Donovan. Now what he says in his narrative is that a friend had come up to show him. But so now a friend had told you, but your friend had seen it on the jail paper, which is the television show that everybody knows. So it wasn't directly to him because he wasn't supposed to be on Facebook. And Facebook is not publicly accessible. I guarantee you, if you type in the website right now on that computer, thejailpaperkeen.com, if you do not have a Facebook, you cannot see it. It was not on YouTube. I never published that video. And the prosecution only admitted that video is on Facebook. The jail paper Keen can only be accessed with a Facebook account. So under my understanding, when I did publish that, and whether it's totally on me that I published it, whether I barrage, whatever nonsense, but at that moment, which was some carajo, like 36 hours after having been in front of Judge Donovan, I was under the presumption that this person who should be in prison would not be on Facebook. The lunacy, what gets me, and I'd like to interject this into my closing arguments, is that the state's prosecution of this now dismissed ex parte against me in favor of John Conley Jr. is
Well, I
lunatic.
can help you with that.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah.
not what the prosecuting for.
Okay, yeah. It's for actually putting the video.
For violating a protective order.
By putting that video up after
Right,
and before.
And you said what you said. I mean, I've heard it twice.
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
seen it twice, and you end with, quote, "I have been watching you." I mean, you make it pretty clear.
Oh, I'll be watching.
You're not directing at me.
no. But you have to have Facebook
I
to
just
go.
wanted you to know.
Oh, no, I know.
What you're being prosecuted for today. You're not being prosecuted because of John Connolly.
No,
You're
no.
prosecuted for violating protective order.
But the best thing one can look at is when you look at it, YouTube is something that's publicly accessible. Like if we're going to go on any computer, we can
Let's
get on
not
YouTube.
talk about YouTube.
Oh, no, yeah. So it's not on YouTube, it's only on Facebook. But Facebook can only be accessed for that. So let's wrap that up.
You mentioned that a handful.
Now I'm going to wrap that up, yeah. I appreciate your patience, Your Honor. I don't do this for a living, so. The speech allegedly that I put in that video, I understand that it could be construed that that's directed at John Conley, but it's not taken out of context. One should say that if you see the video again with the censored, I wish we could show it. I don't have battery on my phone, but you could see the same video. I put music to the background. It's no more threatening than it was. Instead of me saying John Conley Jr., it just beeps a horn. I mean, if I would have done that, then we wouldn't even be standing here. But I believe I was in the process of making a First Amendment constantly protected right. I was not addressing John Conley Jr. directly through Facebook. I was posting a video that I had happened to have in an encounter in law enforcement during a protest against Hunter Knights, a place where John Conley Jr. was not reporting. From the beginning, John Conley Jr. has been lying to this court. I'm being persecuted for trying to tell the truth. John Conley Jr. is getting away for it. So to wrap it up, Your Honor.
You're not being persecuted for telling the truth. I have the complaint in front of me.
Oh, no, I know. And it's not the court.
You're being prosecuted for violating a court order.
Yes.
Nobody's infringing on your First Amendment rights here that I could tell.
I won't argue with the court.
What I see is an allegation that you violated a court order. You're telling me it was unintentional. And you've given me reasons for it being unintentional.
But I'll wrap it up, and I don't want to seem like I'm taking a shot at the court. I didn't want to say like persecution. I should have rephrased it.
Oh, I didn't take it personally. No.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure
I respect this court very much.
You understood what it is I'm focused on. I'm not focused on you being persecuted.
Yeah.
I'm not focused on your,
But what I should,
on the complaint.
well, what I should say is from the beginning, this restraining order should never have come into fruition. Like if I can briefly just lay out why, is that I had never.
No.
Oh no, okay.
You can't. That's gone.
Okay, that's gone. Yeah, we already know about that.
By Justice Donovan.
Exactly.
We're here today and you
Yes.
violating a court order that was in effect at the time.
Yes. So the good thing is it was dismissed. It really should have never come into fruition because I was only from the beginning practicing my First Amendment rights.
I've mentioned that a few times. Do you have anything new for me?
Now, last thing is that
Is it new?
Implode Explode. You probably know Implode Explode though.
Go.
Okay. I'm trying to say it so I'm not repetitive. I believe I will rest.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Case submitted. I think I appreciate the candor of both sides, and the case was well tried. And I think that it's not just the litigants that owe candor towards the tribunal. I think the tribunal on occasion owes the litigants a little candor. And I just, for the life of me, can't recall, and I'll bring it up, but I just can't recall the case. So I'm going to go back and look it up right now in Westlaw. I'll print it off and I'll read it and see whose interpretation I find to fit my analysis of the case. So I'll go do that right now, and I'll work very hard to get an order out today. I may not be able to get an order out today, depending on what we have for emergencies and the like. So I'll try very hard to get it out today, but no promises on that. But I will go read that case right now to refresh my recollection of it.
And Your Honor, one quick question. So far as this is a criminal case.
It is.
How does this? I mean, there can be criminal penalties, but what should I be doing now? Because like
You don't strike me as the sort of person that I need to issue a bail order on now while your case is pending.
Okay.
You know, the conditions of bail are the conditions of bail, and this case is still alive until I reach a decision. So
okay,
that's where you are.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Case submitted. Court adjourned. Thank you.
Please rise. Thank you.
Wait for me. Don't go.
Okay. 2021 CR 2141 State versus Allison Gleason.
Good morning, Attorney Carter.
Good morning, how are you?
The best. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for your help today. You may proceed, Attorney Rourke. Thank you.
I think before I call my first witness, I just wanted to address something preliminary.
You may, thank you.
This case involves a stalking protective order that was issued. It was issued by this court. The court has the petition, has all the records. I'm going to ask that the court, as far as I know, Mr. Parisi isn't arguing the existence of that order. I don't believe that's an issue. The court has heard all of that regarding the order, so I was just going to ask that the court take judicial notice of the order, the existence of it. It was served. The court should have the return of service. The court should also have the form in which the order was ultimately withdrawn back in November. We just ask that they take judicial notice of the existence
Sure,
of
and that's common. Any objection, Mr.
No
Parisi?
objection, Your Honor.
So noted. Thank you, Attorney
Thank you.
Rowe. You may
Um,
proceed.
Thank you. So, first witness, the state calls Officer Colin Germain.
You may.
I'll like the idea.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Okay.
You can have a seat. Could you please state and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Colin Germain. My last name is G-E-R, and I'm
And are you currently employed?
yes, ma'am, I am currently employed.
And how long have you been working for the Keene Police Department?
I've been working for the Keene Police Department since 2019.
And how long have you been working in law enforcement?
I've been working in law enforcement now for 9.5 years, starting back in January 2012.
And you said you took the academy when?
The academy I entered in was the spring of 2017.
And did you successfully complete that?
I did.
So I want to bring your attention to October 31st of 2021. Were you working for the city of Keene on that date?
I was
In what capacity?
working as a uniformed police officer.
And do you recall which shift you were working at that time?
I was working day shift.
All right. And do you recall being asked to make a phone call or return a phone call that morning?
Yes.
And who was that phone call?
It was Sean Connolly.
And why were you asked to call Mr. Connolly?
Mr. Connolly was calling to report violation of protection order.
Okay, and did you call him back? I'm sorry, at this point, were you all familiar with Mr. Connolly?
Not regularly.
And did you know at that point in time who the protective order was against?
Yes, it was against Mr. Thomas Parisi.
Okay, and are you familiar, at that point, were you familiar with Mr. Parisi?
Not personally, but through other officers' encounters.
And at that point, what did you know about Mr. Parisi?
I knew that Mr. Parisi had a number of protection orders out against him, and that he operated a Facebook page known as the Jail Paper.
Okay, and have you ever viewed that page in your capacity as an officer?
No.
Yeah, okay. Did you know anything about what that page was at that time?
From speaking with other officers, it pertains to him exposing or following around sex offenders or criminals.
Did you call Mr. Connolly back right away?
No,
And what did you do at that point?
I actually went on the Facebook page and watched a few videos. One in particular was aimed at Mr. Connolly.
And so is this Facebook page publicly accessible, or did you have to do something special to have access?
It was public. All I had to do was type it in jail.
Okay. So you said that you had viewed some videos on the jail paper at that time before calling Mr. Connolly back, and you said that they involved Mr. Connolly? Okay, do you recall what that video in particular was about?
The video that I watched, male subject wearing a mask, identified himself as Thomas Parisi. Reported that he had an interaction with a state trooper and a supervisor from the Keene Police Department, and them addressing him stalking Mr. Connolly.
Do you recall when that video was posted?
I believe it was posted a few days prior, the day before.
Okay. Now, if I may,
You may.
I would like to approach, I have the video here on my computer, and I would like to play it for Officer Germain, and
Has Mr. Parisi already seen it?
he should have, he should have
Yes,
received it.
Seems like a silly question, but, you know,
He also posted it.
it seems like a silly question, but I don't
So,
know that.
I'm just
All right,
going to-
thank you, you
may
may
I
approach,
approach?
thank you. Mr. Parisi, move where you need to move to see it.
Certainly, Your Honor.
Thank you. I can see that you're the attorney work, if
Okay,
that's
it's up
helpful.
to
I don't know
you.
if the witness can see it, but
Thank you.
Large.
I can see it.
It's the jail paper. We survived. Higher quality, we're going to stop doing live videos. Because apparently today, someone watching the live video called the police and said that I was stalking John Conley. One nice gentleman from the state troopers and one nice gentleman in car number 29 from Keene PD came to speak with me. And as you can see, no silver bracelets. And I'm not stalking, but listen, John Conley, why don't you report to where you're supposed to report to? You're not supposed to be in a van down by the river. You're supposed to be in bed at 100 nights. Because that's where you're registered to, mister. I'll be watching you. Thomas Parisi for the jail paper.
And is that the video that you recall watching prior to calling Mr. Conley?
Yes, ma'am.
So after you watched this video, did you call Mr. Connolly back?
I actually didn't get a chance to actually show it in the lobby.
Okay, so you met with him in the lobby?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you please describe that interaction with him in the lobby?
Mr. Connolly was pretty upset. He had the videos on his phone. He attempted to have me watch them. As soon as I saw the video that he was going to show me, I explained to him, hey, I had just watched this.
And what did he have to say about that video?
He presented me his copy of the protection order that he had against Mr. Parisi. And he identified the section which specifically states that Mr. Parisi is not to have contact with him, either first person, third person, through mail, fax, and social media, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And you saw that in the protective order?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to confirm that at all?
Yes, ma'am.
So after speaking with Mr. Connolly and taking that report, what did you do?
Essentially what I did was I went and I spoke to my supervisor, because I had an opinion on the matter, to kind of confirm and deny what I believe and deny.
And what did you determine that from that?
So based on that conversation, it kind of agreed with me that, hey, at the time, we did not believe that it was a violation of the protection.
Okay. Obviously, at some point, that
Yes.
changed then.
A few days later, a different supervisor approached me, presented me with case law that greatly changed my opinion.
Okay. And did you speak with Mr. Parisi about these videos? And do you see Mr. Parisi in the room today?
Yes, ma'am.
And where do you see him?
He's right here.
Okay. And what color is his, what is he wearing?
He's wearing a red tie and a gray suit jacket.
Okay. I just like the record to reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant as Mr. Thomas Parisi.
So noted, thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't have questions. No more further questions.
Mr. Parisi, any questions?
Yes, sir.
You may. Thank you.
I did want to ask the court a matter of procedure. I don't have a copy with me of the narrative, but I presume, as Attorney O'Rourke had asked, if we can acknowledge the existence of the order, could we acknowledge the existence of the arrest affidavit and all that other, all those other documents with it? I don't have the actual physical copy with me, but it's something that the witness, or Officer Germain, had wrote himself. So I do have passages in here that I wanted to ask some questions.
Go ahead,
Okay.
thank you.
Officer Germain, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
All right. So I was, let's see, I have that. So, let's, bear with me one second. So, Officer Germain, had we had any prior interaction before, the first time that we had interacted on Halloween, I believe it was October 31st?
I can't remember.
When was the first time had you reviewed this stalking petition? When were you first aware of John Conley Jr.'s stalking injunction that he had against me?
I honestly can't remember.
Oh, okay. Let me do this better. Okay, would it be safe to say that on, I believe it says on October 24th, according to paragraph 2 of your thing, is when the initial, sorry, I'm kind of out of sorts, Your Honor. I don't have the affidavit, so I have the witness's notes from it. Can I read that into the record?
You can't read it into the record, but you can take your time.
And just-
Take a deep breath, take your time,
Okay.
look at what you gotta look through.
Thank you, sir.
No trouble at all.
Bear with me one moment, Mr. Germain. Here we go. So, in your affidavit and narrative, did you acknowledge that I was a journalist?
I did not.
Okay. And, well, in documenting encounters and circumstances, and then subsequently publishing these encounters and circumstances that you had described, that going after known sex offenders, would you consider what I was doing a form of journalism?
I don't really have anything on that.
Okay. Are you familiar at all with a case referred to as implode, explode, mortgage specialists versus implode, explode? No, okay. And how familiar are you with State versus Craig before you had initially seen it?
I was not familiar with it at all.
How much did you review State versus Craig?
I read it at length.
Can you tell the court in a very brief way how you interpret, to your own way, that you had come to your acknowledgement that you had seen what had gone from what you saw as not a violation to a violation? How did State versus Craig change your opinion?
So, State versus Craig was a case where a subject was involved in stalking behavior, sending mail to a woman, posting publicly on his Facebook page, which was not set to private, where he directed messages at a specific person who was the protected party in an order against him. Because the page was public, that she could then access those messages, it would then complete the violation of the protection order.
Okay, excellent. Your Honor, I have 2 copies of State versus Craig. I would like to see if I can enter them into, as evidence.
I think, the state doesn't necessarily object to that, but I think when it comes to the case law, I would reserve that for argument at the end, if you want to make some argument about, I plan to make an argument, I think, because I think really the crux of this case is whether or not that video falls within the confines of State v. Craig, or he can.
I was looking, Your Honor, for one passage to see if Officer Germain had read specifically to the freedom, where there's certain constitutional activities, such as freedom of express, freedom of the press, that are specifically outlined within State and Craig that do not fall within the criteria of what this officer had charged me with. So I wanted to enter in State versus Craig if the
I agree with the state that it's
argumentative.
No, it's a little out of sync right now, but if it'll help your flow, I'll accept it right now.
Okay. Bear with me one second, because I have...
Defendant A.
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. Let's see. And bear with me just one moment, Your Honor. It's very lengthy. Your Honor, if I can have an example of part of State v. Craig, if the witness had read it, I would like to see if I can have him read one passage of State versus Craig of the examples of stalking behavior.
I'll give you some leeway on that.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
And I will highlight the section, which is right here. And if you, Officer Germain, could read that small part starting with kitty cat, comma.
Are you referring to
That paragraph, yes, yes.
I should remind you that since you would have to choose to look at the things I say to you on Facebook, that means my butt is covered. Also, you are not allowed to do anything back to me all week, as it would constitute a breach in your end of the whole restraining order. So technically, you are the one in cuffs. Ha ha.
Okay. So now was this published, because you had mentioned this was public, was this published on an individual Facebook page, a business Facebook page? Where was this published on?
The video that was posted,
No, this.
this is
Stay versus credit.
is on a personal Facebook page.
Excellent, okay. Let's see. All right. And were you aware of at the beginning of the investigation that John Conley Jr. was a known sex offender? When you were aware of John Conley being a sex offender when he initially made contact with you about this violation?
I didn't think it was relevant.
Okay. All right, good.
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear that.
Oh, you said
I
something.
didn't think it was relevant.
Okay, I just didn't hear the answer.
It's not germane, I guess. Okay. So are you familiar with Facebook? More or less, do you use Facebook? Okay. And let's see. And in setting up the account for Facebook, did you read the terms and conditions of Facebook's service and policies that users have to abide by?
No.
Okay. So, let's see. So now what I want to do, Your Honor, is I have with me that I wanted to try to enter into evidence was this Facebook's service, terms of service and conditions of use, which has in it specifically that convicted sex offenders are not allowed to use that platform. In publishing this alleged said video, I was under the impression when I published it, individuals like John Conley Jr., who were not allowed to use Facebook to begin with, wouldn't be on that platform, which I'll introduce later, because obviously there's a video with me with a mask that's published in there. However, the terms and conditions of service for Facebook are not allowing individuals like that, and John Conley Jr., which I'll enter in when he comes in, John Conley Jr. is prohibited by his sentencing to be on it. But would I wait to enter the Facebook terms and conditions till after when Conley comes in, or now?
Well, we've got a couple questions there. The last one is that the flow is kind of up to your feel and how you want to present it. I don't want to dictate that to you, but let me see if Attorney O'Rourke has any issue with the terms and conditions.
I have no issue with that, but I have to stipulate to the fact that they have these terms and conditions that prohibit people who are alleged. I think that's what Mr. Parisi is trying to say. I'm fine stipulating to that fact that that is accurate.
So there's no need, she's agreeing, you're
I'm
right?
agreeing.
There's no need to prove it to me.
Yeah,
You said you're right.
thank you. And now, basically, if I had set up the jail paper on Facebook and I began reporting on known sex offenders, as you had stated, I must have agreed to it. So do you think that I could rely on Facebook's terms of service to only allow authorized users who have the right to be on Facebook, as I had mentioned, excluding persons such as known and convicted sex offenders? Would I reasonably, as a reasonable individual, have that expectation? Would you believe?
I suppose.
I suppose, okay. And I'm going to wrap it up now, Your Honor. Let me see.
Take your time.
Okay. Is it possible, because I'm very lacking in procedure, I'm overexcited, but I appreciate the court's patience. Is it possible to call him back as a witness for a brief questioning after Mr. Conley? Or should I just,
But if you
okay.
can convince me there's a good, legitimate reason to, you can, but highly likely.
I think this is all. I think I'm going to wrap up. Yeah.
All right. Attorney O'Rourke, anything polished up?
I just want to ask one
Sure.
question. After you read or became aware of State v. Craig, did you feel at that point that you had some probable cause to file or reason to file an arrest warrant?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And you got an arrest warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
No further.
One quick
May,
follow-up.
I could tell the way you were looking.
Yeah, okay, no.
Famous, one more question.
Yeah, excuse me, sir, one more question. So, how many times have you actually, in a law enforcement capacity, you have been a law enforcement officer for 9 years now? If I'm correct, from our conversations, you had worked initially at the jail,
Yes, sir.
and then you worked for Marlboro Police Department,
Yes, sir.
and then you came to Keene Police.
Yes, sir.
Now, through your 9-year career in law enforcement, how many times have you found State versus Craig applicable to you being then compelled as a police officer to serve the community and arrest, an individual in violation? How many times have you felt compelled that you had to find State versus Craig to be able to stop somebody
I
from?
can tell you that was the first time I've heard of state v. Craig. So
Okay.
it changed my opinion of the particular case that I
Now, let me ask you, how far?
You may proceed, Attorney Rourke. Thank you.
I think before I call my first witness, I just wanted to address something preliminary.
You may, thank you.
This case involves a stalking protective order that was issued. It was issued by this court. The court has the petition, has all the records. I'm going to ask that the court, as far as I know, Mr. Parisi isn't arguing the existence of that order. I don't believe that's an issue. The court has heard all of that regarding the order, so I was just going to ask that the court take judicial notice of the order, the existence of it. It was served. The court should have the return of service. The court should also have the form in which the order was ultimately withdrawn back in November. We just ask that they take judicial notice of the existence
Sure,
of
and that's common. Any objection, Mr.
No
Parisi?
objection, Your Honor.
So noted. Thank you, Attorney Rourke. You may proceed.
Thank you. So, first witness, the state calls Officer Colin Germain.
You may.
I'll like to do that.
Good morning. Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Okay.
You can have a seat. Could you please state and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Colin Germain. My last name is G-E-R-M-A-I-N.
And are you currently employed?
Yes, ma'am, I am currently employed.
And how long have you been working for the Keene Police Department?
I've been working for the Keene Police Department since 2019.
And how long have you been working in law enforcement?
I've been working in law enforcement now for 9.5 years, starting back in June 2012.
And you said you took the academy when?
The academy I entered in was the spring of 2017.
And did you successfully complete that? So I want to bring your attention to October 31st of 2021. Were you working for the city of Keene on that date?
I was
In what capacity?
working as a uniformed police officer.
And do you recall which shift you were working at that time?
I was working day shift.
All right. And do you recall being asked to make a phone call or return a phone call that morning?
Yes.
And who was that phone call?
It was John Connolly.
And why were you asked to call Mr. Connolly?
Mr. Connolly was calling to report violation of protection.
Okay, and did you call him back? I'm sorry, at this point, were you at all familiar with Mr. Connolly?
Not particularly.
And did you know at that point in time who the protective order was against?
Yes, it was against Mr. Thomas Parisi.
Okay, and are you familiar, at that point, were you familiar with Mr. Parisi?
Not personally, but through other officers' encounters. We heard.
And at that point, what did you know about Mr. Parisi?
I knew that Mr. Parisi had a number of protection orders out against him, and that he operated a Facebook page known as the Jail Paper.
Okay, and have you ever viewed that page in your capacity as an officer?
No.
No, okay. Did you know anything about what that page was at that time?
From speaking with other officers, it pertains to him exposing or following around
Mr. Connolly back right away?
No,
Okay, what did you do at that point?
I actually went on the Facebook page and watched a few videos. One in particular was aimed at Mr. Connolly.
Okay. And so is this Facebook page publicly accessible, or did you have to do something special to have access?
It was public. All I had to do was type it in jail.
Okay. So you said that you had viewed some videos on the jail paper at that time before calling Mr. Connolly back, and you said that they involved Mr. Connolly? Okay, do you recall what that video in particular was about?
The video that I watched, a male subject wearing a mask, identified himself as Thomas Parisi, reported that he had an interaction with a state trooper and a supervisor from the Keene Police Department, and them addressing him stalking Mr. Connolly.
Do you recall when that video was posted?
I believe it was posted a few days prior, the day before.
Okay. Now, if I may,
You may.
I would like to approach, I have the video here on my computer, and I would like to play it for Officer Jermaine, and
Has Mr. Parisi already seen it?
he should have
Yes,
received
It
it.
seems like a silly question, but, you know,
He also posted it.
it seems like a silly question, but I don't
So,
know that.
I'm just
All right,
gonna-
Thank you, you
may
may
I
approach,
approach?
thank you. Mr. Parisi, move where you need to move to see it.
Certainly, Your Honor.
Thank you. I can see that good, Attorney Rourke, if
Okay,
that's
it's
helpful. I
okay.
don't know if the witness can see it, but I can
Large.
see it.
It's the jail paper. We survived. Higher quality, we're gonna stop doing live videos. Because apparently today, someone watching the live video called the police and said that I was stalking John Connolly. But one nice gentleman from the state troopers and one nice gentleman in car number 29 from Keene PD came to speak with me. And as you can see, no silver bracelets, and I'm not stalking, but listen, John Connolly, why don't you report to where you're supposed to report to? You're not supposed to be in a band down by the river. You're supposed to be in bed at 100 nights, because that's where you're registered to, mister. I've been watching you. Thomas Parisi for the jail paper.
And is that the video that you recall watching prior to calling Mr. Connolly?
Yes, ma'am.
So after you watched this video, did you call Mr. Connolly back?
I actually didn't get a chance to actually show it in the lobby.
Okay, so you met with him in the lobby?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you please describe that interaction with him in the lobby?
Mr. Connolly was pretty upset. He had the videos on his phone. He attempted to have me watch them. As soon as I saw the video that he was going to show me, I had to explain to him, hey, I just watched this.
And what did he have to say about that video?
He presented me his copy of the protection order that he had against Mr. Parisi, and he identified the section which specifically states that Mr. Parisi is not to have contact with him, either first person, third person, through mail, fax, and social media, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And you saw that in the protective order?
Yes.
Were you able to confirm that at all?
Yes,
So after speaking with Mr. Connolly and taking that report, what did you do?
Essentially what I did was I went and I spoke to my supervisor, because I had an opinion on the matter, to kind of confirm and deny what I believe and deny.
And what did you determine that from that?
So based on that conversation, it kind of agreed with me that, hey, at the time, we did not believe that it was a violation of the protection.
Okay. Obviously, at some point, that
Yes.
changed then.
A few days later, a different supervisor approached me, presented me with case law that greatly changed my opinion.
Okay. And did you speak with Mr. Parisi about these videos